Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Friday, September the 27th, 2024. Why do I talk about Kamala Harris so much? Am I obsessed with her? Well, Kamala Harris is trying to be US president. Many would say that she has a very good chance of being elected to the White House. And so her horoscope matters, and she has a time birth, and personally I find her horoscope fascinating, and I think that there is plenty to talk about. And in this video, once I've looked at the astrology and the I Ching for today, I'm going to be doing a Kamala Harris update. Now, I did suggest quite recently that when Venus goes into Scorpio, that things might not look so good for her. My argument for that would be that Venus is a universal significator of women. Venus has been in mutual reception by exaltation with Saturn, but it's no longer in exaltation. In fact, Venus has had a rapid fall in its in its condition. So Venus used to be very strong. It used to be in Libra, mutual reception with Saturn by exaltation. In fact, it was trine Jupiter at one stage, and now it's just gone into Scorpio, into its detriment. And I kind of think we're seeing this. I mean, maybe I've got it wrong. Maybe I'm looking at the wrong news channels, but it does seem that since Venus in Scorpio, the news flow about Kamala Harris has not been so positive. There's been more negativity about her polling numbers, and at the same time, there have been questions about just her ability to interact. There are questions about where is she? Her ability to give interviews. She's had very soft interviews. I think she had an interview with Oprah, which even that she messed up. And so in a public sense, she seems to have a problem. Now, we know that she's a very clever woman, very successful woman, doesn't take away from that. She was a successful lawyer. However she became successful, whether it's through her contacts or her talents or whatever, it doesn't really matter. The point is she is successful and she is vice president and she's very close to being president. So I'm not taking away from the fact that she's achieved a great deal. But the question is, what is going wrong right now? Well, I think that has something to do with Venus in Scorpio. And also, what is this problem with dealing with the public and just being open in an interview? I've looked at the debate, and I've looked at situations where she has spoken. She doesn't speak with authority. She doesn't give me the impression that she knows what's going on. Now, that might not be true. It may be that she just has an issue dealing with the public. And that's what I really want to consider in this video. Why has she got an issue? What is holding her back? And I think there are a couple of things in her horoscope that might be doing this that I do want to look at. Also, I want to just have an update on what's going on in her chart. Now, as you know, I believe she's going to lose. I don't say I know she's going to lose. I haven't got a good, solid horary chart where I can say for sure she is going to lose. In 2020, I knew for sure that Trump was going to lose. I don't say I know for absolute 100%, with 100% certainty that she is going to lose. But I have to look at the balance of evidence, and the balance of evidence suggests to me that she's going to lose. Plus, I have to say she's going to lose anyway, don't I? Because it's all part of a game. I mean, you are watching me, and some of you might be hoping that I embarrass myself. It would be fun if I get it wrong, won't it? But no, looking at the balance of evidence, I'm fairly certain that she's going to lose in November. But I'm going to look at some of the evidence which supports her case for winning, as well as evidence for her losing. I want to sort of look at both at the end of this video. But first of all, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today. Now, just a reminder, the usual reminder, sorry to be boring, but if you like this video, I'd be really grateful if you were to indicate that you like this video, and if you are not subscribed, then I would be really happy if you were to subscribe, because I think I need all the subscribers I can get, although I do understand that subscription isn't the only thing. Okay, so let's look at what's happening today, which is Friday, September the 27th, 2024. So here is the chart for Friday, and you will see that the moon is firmly in Leo, 8 degrees, 9 degrees of the sign in New York at noon. So it's very much a moon in Leo day. Now, there aren't actually a great many aspects today. It's not a super exciting day, I would have said, astrologically. The moon makes sextiles to the Sun and Mercury. So those moon sextiles to the Sun and Mercury, I would have said that they facilitate communication. You know, moon in Leo sextiles those two Libra planets, and we've also got moon sextile Sun. As I always say, moon sextile Sun, it's a nice aspect. Even if that sextile isn't exact in your time zone or at a particular time of day, there is still a sextile relationship to the Sun. The Sun is in Libra, the Moon is in Leo, the lights with those two planets, the Sun and the Moon. Okay, I know technically they're not planets. The Sun is a star and the Moon is a satellite, but we just call them planets because it's convenient. So they do have a nice relationship there. So that's certainly something that should give a boost to the day. And at the same time, the moon does make a square to Venus. So Venus, you can see that there's the moon, there is Venus, moon making a square to Venus. So what's that about? It can be a little bit overindulgent. When you've got the moon and Venus making a hard aspect, it can be a problem. JF Kennedy had a moon square Venus. Now in his horoscope, that moon square Venus could be saying something about his relationships. What do they say? The virgin and the whore, or that kind of thing. With his chart, with the moon being in square, he had two aspects of femininity, or not necessarily the virgin, the mother, the honourable woman who stays at home, and then there is the other women in his life. So that's how moon square Venus can work. But with this moon square Venus, it's a sense of, it can be overindulgence. We can take things too far. Perhaps we can take our emotions too far, or there just may be a clash between the moon in Leo and Venus in Scorpio. So the moon in Leo is all about ourselves and our power and perhaps getting attention and getting a sense for who we are and what we want. But then perhaps Venus square Scorpio undermines it a little. Venus in Scorpio gives us doubts. Perhaps in certain cases our emotions may not be particularly helpful, and perhaps we might become a little too self-conscious. We're trying to be in the centre of attention, but then Venus comes along, that rather complicated Venus in Scorpio, and yes, that could be rather undermining. So that's the broad picture. Over Sun. The Sun is starting to make a conjunction to the South Node. Now that conjunction to the South Node will not be exact until tomorrow, but still I think we need to take it into account. Sun conjunct South Node is generally about doing the wrong thing. It's not necessarily making a mistake, but it's perhaps applying ourselves in the wrong direction. We may think it's appropriate, for example, to behave in an archetypally Libran way, Sun conjunct Libra in the South Node. And that Sun in Libra, it's actually in its detriment. And I don't want to really emphasize too much the fact that the Sun is in its detriment. Sorry, not detriment, I mean, it's in its fall. So the Sun is fallen in Libra. And so it's not a great sign for Libra to be in. Sorry, it's not a great sign for the Sun to be in. And the fact that it's conjunct the South Node means perhaps that some of us might want to compromise or do something to make everyone happy. But in the process, it's not the right thing to do. The right thing to do is, of course, North Node in Aries. We have to be dynamic, and many of us have to be clear about what we want, what we don't want, what is right, what is wrong. And the South Node conjunct the Sun may incline us to do what is comfortable, just what makes us feel at ease. And in the process, we might be allowing bad things to happen. So I don't think it's a time to keep quiet. If you see an injustice, if you see something wrong, or if it might be best to just look the other way. But I think with the Sun conjunct South Node, we should consider the possibility that that is not really the right thing to do. Now, turning to the heliocentric picture, because geocentrically, there's not a great deal going on here. I wouldn't have said. So heliocentrically, here we put the Earth in the center of things, and the Sun in the center of things. So because it's a heliocentric chart, we're looking at things from a perspective of the Sun, and Mars is trine Pluto. That trine between Mars and Pluto is probably exact yesterday, but it's still there. It's still very much around. And so with Mars trine Pluto, this perhaps is a time where some of us can really start to apply ourselves. We can be very definite, and we can be very clear about what we want, what we don't want. And if we want to create change and transformation with Mars trine Pluto, it looks as if there is a way that we can do it. But the heliocentric chart is looking at things in a sort of a broader, more sort of collective way. And it may be that Mars trine Pluto is not about us applying ourselves, asserting ourselves. It's about what is happening in the world around us. And there may be people and institutions that really want their way, and they want their way now. And in the process, they might be very manipulative, or it might actually just be a show of overwhelming power, Mars trine Pluto, the kind of power that you just take the view that, is there any point? Is there any point in resisting it? We might as well just give in. That might be the best approach. So look out for Mars trine Pluto. It could be something you can use, but it might be something that other people are using. And in itself, Mars trine Pluto is not good or bad. It's not right or wrong. You have to consider the situation, and perhaps you have to ask, what exactly is appropriate. Some things are appropriate, some things definitely are not appropriate. So I think that is the main thing happening from a heliocentric point of view. So as you can see, overall, astrologically today, I would have said it's quite quiet, in a theoretical sense. That doesn't mean to say nothing is going to happen, but in terms of astrology, it does seem that there isn't much activity, and I'm hoping that that is going to be reflected in my forecasts for the 12 signs. I'm hoping that my forecasts for the 12 signs are going to be briefer than usual. Okay, so let me now look at the 12 signs for Friday, September the 27th, 2024. So these are my forecasts for today, which, one thing I forgot, so my apologies, and that is the situation for Sydney. So I like to look at the the geocentric chart in terms of Australia and New Zealand, and Australia and New York, simply because of the huge time zone difference. So this is the picture at noon in Sydney, Australia. So this kind of applies to New Zealand, East Asia, but set for noon. You can see that the moon is still in Leo at noon in Sydney. So in Australia and New Zealand, to an extent, it is still a Leo day, but this morning, and perhaps early this afternoon if you are in New Zealand, the moon is still going to be in Cancer. So there may be a slightly different emphasis there. So you might feel that for half of the day there is a moon in Cancer feel, that there is an emphasis on the emotional side of things. And you may also feel that transition between moon in Cancer moving from Cancer to Leo. Now, if you're in the Americas or in Europe, that transition is done. It's over. But yeah, in Australia and New Zealand, that transition is still there. You're still picking up on it. So, if you are in Australasia, it's kind of a Cancer Leo day, and I think especially the case if you're in New Zealand, where the moon doesn't actually move into Leo until the early afternoon. Okay, so let me now go back to the New York picture. It doesn't really matter. That's the New York heliocentric chart, and let me just change the coordinates, and there we go. Okay, so these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Friday, September the 27th, 2024. Aries, you're now enjoying the moon being in Leo. The moon is in Leo regardless of where you are. Okay, if you're in Australasia, the moon might move into Leo late morning or perhaps even early afternoon. But I think for everyone, we can enjoy the moon being in this sign. Well, I say enjoy. If you're an Aries, I think you will enjoy it. The moon is in a fire sign. You, as an Aries, very much appreciate having the moon in a fire sign. It gives you a sense of energy and purpose, and you feel that you definitely have something to do, and at the same time you seem to understand what's happening. You understand what's going on, and you are able to make sense of things. Not everyone can make sense of things. People can take ages and ages to make up their mind, but Aries, I think today you can actually make up your mind extremely quickly. You don't have to analyze things. You don't have to, listen to your feelings for ages and ages. It all feels really very clear. And with the moon making a sextile to the sun, there is a sense that you and other people are by and large on the same wavelength. You do understand that people do have their opinions. Those opinions might not be entirely your opinions, but you can work with it. And you also know that it's very important at the end of the day to have your way. Now, you can get your way in many different ways. You don't have to use force. You can use gentle persuasion. Remembering, Aries, that Mars, heliocentrically, is trine Pluto. So that Mars trine Pluto is, I think, for you, a very useful aspect. Well, now, when I say Mars trine Pluto, by the way, of course, I'm talking about a heliocentric Mars trine Pluto. And with that heliocentric Mars trine Pluto, that's saying something about the solar system. It's very cosmic. There is a sort of energy and a vibe out there that allows Aries to just get their way without too much fuss. So do be confident, and if you believe something, if you think something is right, then just let it happen. You don't have to get involved in complicated power games. In fact, the average Aries absolutely hates complicated power games because you just want everything to be really simple. So overall, Aries, I think it's a good day. I think that there are definitely things that you want to do. I think that you will have a great sense of yourself. And I don't think you're going to get much in the way of resistance, particularly from the group. Okay, you might get resistance from one particular person. Moon does make a square to Venus, and I suppose that Moon square Venus represents perhaps someone you know very well, perhaps someone you know too well, someone who might be perhaps more emotional than you, might just not want to move at your kind of pace and may have a few objections. But I don't think that's necessarily particularly important. I think if you look at the overall picture, I don't think you're going to have much difficulty putting your plans into action. Taurus, you possibly feel that you don't have to make any great effort, and you certainly don't have to do anything that you're uncomfortable with. So do what makes you feel happy, and go to places where you feel that the light is on you and where you feel secure. Now, when I say where the light is on you, that doesn't mean the limelight. It just means a place where you are appreciated. And appreciation for you right now, I think, really does matter. And I think you're going to find that the people who know you best and the people who are going to be most supportive are going to be the people who are with you all the time. You know, perhaps your family and your close friends. You don't need to stray too far from your own limits. And so there may be temptations to, go out and about, to, I don't know, go places, but I think those temptations can be resisted. Just stick to what you know and trust, stick to people you know and trust, and then I think that everyone is going to be fine, and certainly you're going to be fine. Now, the moon does make a sextile to the Sun and Mercury, and that is a nice aspect. That's a nice pair of aspects, and that pair of aspects, again, it's going to make you feel comfortable. I think you're going to find it relatively easy, to tell everyone what's on your mind, and you'll be able to concentrate on the things that matter. And I think that it does suggest quite a productive day. Now, the only thing that one might want to worry about is the fact that the moon is square Venus, and also that the sun is semi-sextile Venus. There's a semi-sextile relationship between the sun and Venus because they are 30 degrees apart. They're sort of going roughly at the same speed. So we've got that kind of all the time at the moment. But starting with a moon square Venus. That moon square Venus means that you have to consider what are threats to your comfort. What could actually make you feel uncomfortable? And I think what could make you feel uncomfortable is trying too hard to understand people. Venus in Scorpio, that's you. Venus in Scorpio but it's in Scorpio. It's in your opposite sign. And so if you do get really, really close to someone, particularly on an emotional level, it may not feel entirely easy. And I think you can enjoy people's company, but I think you want to avoid too much emotion. Too much emotion could spoil things. And also with that Sun semi-sextile Venus, that Sun, it is in Libra. And so with Sun semi-sextile Venus, it may be that you're aware that something is undermining you, perhaps on a physical level. And maybe you're doing something to make someone else happy, or perhaps you feel obliged to help someone. And perhaps this activity, which is very nice, very charitable, may not be doing you any good. And so, Libra, your first priority, Taurus, your first priority is to look after your own health. You don't want to martyr yourself, because it's actually quite unnecessary. And Taurus, if you just, as I've said, stick to what makes you feel comfortable, stick to what you know and trust, then today is going to be great. Gemini, you are, I think, at the moment very communicative. You have got the ability to express yourself very well. You know what to say, you know how to say it. And I think that, if you use your abilities in the best possible way, you'll be able to make other people feel better. That's because the moon is in Leo, and the moon in Leo is about pride, and it's about the ego. But it's not just about your pride and your ego, it's about other people's pride and ego. And it does seem that the things you say can make people feel better about themselves. And you'll just know what to say. You'll be quite good at flattering people. It will come very easily to you. It's just words. Okay, there might be something a little bit insincere about your flattery, but it will feel right. And I don't think it will do any harm. I think it actually could do a lot of good. Yes, Gemini, you are great. Absolutely fantastic. Of all the 12 signs, Gemini is far and away the greatest, best, and most intelligent sign there is. But of course, I would say that being a Gemini myself. But that is moon in Leo. And with the moon making a sextile to Mercury and a sextile to Sun, that moon sextile Mercury is about communication. It's about what we say. And it just reminds us that, what we say can actually be really uplifting. And at the same time, it's not just about making other people feel good, it's also about making us feel good. And right now, Gemini, you are where it's at, and you feel that you're able to express a fundamental belief about you and the world and what you want. And actually, Gemini, when you want to be today, you can be very dynamic, extremely dynamic, and you'll give the impression that you actually can make things happen. I don't know whether that's actually true. Geminis can be quite bad at making things happen. They're quite good at talking about making things happen, but can they actually make things happen in the real world? Well, I think they can, if you get it right. if you get the balance right between, your ideas and your plans and what the demands are of other people, and don't forget your social life today. Don't forget your friends. Don't ignore them. Don't feel that you needed them yesterday, but you don't need them today. You do need all the people you can get right now. I mean, I know that you might feel that there is a certain dichotomy between your creative genius and the demands of other people, but really there's no dichotomy at all. If you're going to be brilliant, you need other people to help you. And so getting the balance right there is, I think, going to be extremely important. But still, Gemini, I think just all you have to do is make people feel good about themselves. And if you can make people feel good about themselves today, then I think you'll be starting to feel good about yourself. So everyone is a winner. Cancer. Cancer, there may be a little bit of an emphasis on money today. I think that is possible because of the moon being in Leo. And with the moon being in Leo, you might feel that you have to consider what you have. And you have to get the balance right. There is a certain temptation here to define yourself by what you have, just today, or perhaps tomorrow. And it's probably not particularly healthy. And I suppose there could be a comparative element to it. Leo is about pride and the pride in what you have. And don't be too proud with what you have. What you have is only temporary. I heard someone say that if you buy something new, I don't know, whatever it is, a car, piece of electronics, whatever it is, when you buy something new, you should imagine what this thing will look like in however many years' time when it's battered and smashed up, and it will give you a better feeling for what you've got in front of you. It will make you more grounded, and it will help you understand the impermanence of things. And of course, when something does get scratched and smashed up, as inevitably happens to things, then you won't be so upset. So perhaps, Cancer, you shouldn't spend too much time defining yourself by what you have and what you don't have, because what matters is, of course, you. And particularly from a spiritual perspective, we can't take it with us, can we? But I understand that many Cancerians couldn't care less about the material side of things, and you're thinking about the broader picture, in which case I think that you have a sense of what matters today and what doesn't matter. And if you can focus on what matters, on what resources you need to take from A to B, then I think that you'll be very much doing things right. And I think the focus should be on yourself and making sure you've got everything, but you shouldn't take that focus too far, especially with the fact that we've got the Sun conjunct the South Node in Libra. Okay, that conjunction is exact tomorrow, but I think you're still getting a feel for it. And with that Sun conjunct the South Node, there may be a sense in which you're being a little bit dragged down. You feel that you've got to move in a particular way, that you need to not be distracted, and that what is happening in public doesn't matter. What's happening in, I don't know, in the world out there is not really your concern, and that you can perhaps ignore it. But that would be a symptom of being dragged down, of just focusing on your own private interests, for example, your home, your domestic life, and that could be not particularly helpful. You do have to keep in contact with what is happening out there. It does matter. You may not feel that it matters right now, but I really do think that it does matter. So try not to be too insular today, because I think that you might then, if you were to be too insular, I think you might be missing some important opportunities. Leo. The moon continues moving through your sign, and all of us have got moon in Leo. Okay, if you're in Australia, the moon might not go into Leo until the late morning. If you're in New Zealand, it might not go into Leo until the early afternoon. But in the end, the moon is going to be in Leo for all of us. And if you're a Leo, with the moon being in this sign, I think it's a great place for the moon to be. It allows you to get a sense of who you are and what makes you special, and you're able to explain things to people. It may be that in the past, Leo, you have found it difficult to get your message across. You felt that it wasn't the right time. But now, with the moon making a sextile to Mercury and the sextile to the Sun, I think that you can be very clear about who you are and what you want. And in most cases, people are going to listen to you. But, you do have to be a bit patient. Things may take a little bit of time. You need to get that traction. And so, the first time you say something, it may be a little bit slow. People might not entirely get you, but you say it again, and you show some consistency and reliability. And I think that will be very much appreciated. And the moon in Leo, it does actually make a trine to the North Node in Aries. And so the North Node can very much be connected with other people, with connections. And with the moon making a trine to the North Node, it might be relatively easy for you to make connections. You don't have to make an effort. You don't have to go out of your way to find people. The people you need, I think, are really close at hand. And so see what you can do, because it is a time when you can be the center of attention. And, in the end, people are going to listen to you. And you shouldn't feel shy. You shouldn't allow any feelings of uncertainty get you down. If you do have questions, particularly of an emotional nature, about what you're doing, why you're doing it, you might have the odd doubt, but you don't have to worry about that. You're able to get through that, and I think that will allow you to have actually quite a productive day. Now, one thing about your abilities and your talents and the things the things you're good at, they are important, but you may have some doubts in this direction. It may be that if you are doing something you feel that you're really good at, you might feel that things aren't working. You might have a certain area of expertise and you put your energy into it, but it just doesn't deliver. And so the question is, what is actually going on? I think that what is going on is something passing. It's just passing hesitancy on your part. You may not actually be prepared to give it everything you've got, or it may be that you're being a little too rigid. So, this is particularly the case if you're dealing with something you're good at, but perhaps you haven't exercised it for a few days, and you go back to it and you try to do it, and at first it doesn't seem to be working, and you're doing things the same old way. and you're not really taking into account the fact that the world has changed a little bit. It hasn't changed that much, but it has changed a little bit. So if you do something in the way you used to do it, then you might be disappointed. So, whatever that ability is, it perhaps needs to be upgraded. Not upgraded in any great way. It just needs to be changed. Just a little fine-tuning. And that's something you can do. So just a small warning there that if you want to do something clever and you know you're good at it, you may just have to work on it a little bit, just to take into account the fact that the world is changing, and you do have to streamline things and also tailor them to whatever's going on around you. So do take that into account, and really that's the main thing. I think that today is fairly straightforward. I think that you're going to be, or you can be, at the centre of attention. Not in a particularly dramatic way. There's no need to be dramatic. It's all going to be very easy. People like you, and you're going to like them. And the moon is also sextile the sun. Moon is in Leo, and it's sextile the sun in Libra, and that does create a sense of well-being and a feeling of just general comfort. So overall, a satisfactory day. But just remember, the things you're good at, you need to just change your approach a little. They just need to be upgraded. They don't have to be replaced. Just an upgrade of your talents and abilities to take into account changing circumstances might be advisable. Virgo, you may want to watch things from afar. You don't necessarily have to be fully engaged. Why would you have to be engaged? You can't be everywhere at once. And just right now, it seems, Virgo, that you probably don't want to be seen or heard. Not to any great extent, because I think, Virgo, you're going to do your best work when you are alone, or in a fairly secluded environment. If you're with other people, you're forced to spend time with other people. I think that could grind you down, and I'm not convinced that you're going to be a great conversationalist today. I mean, conversation may be important to you, but if you try to talk to people, I think you're just going to feel that something is missing, or else that something is being taken too seriously. There could just be an emotional side to any conversation which just gets you down. It's like you're talking to someone, and the conversation seems simple, but in fact it's very forced, and perhaps you're not prepared to reveal something, maybe someone else isn't prepared to reveal something, and the whole thing could be completely unsatisfactory. So perhaps, Virgo, conversations should be avoided, particularly with people who you don't know very well. It's not a great day for small talk. I mean, I don't know how good you are at small talk in general. I mean, Virgo, I suppose, is not a sign you normally associate with small talk, but many Virgos are great conversationalists. But at the moment, there is this sense of silences can just emerge, and these silences can be very uncomfortable. So it's better not to try talking unless it's necessary. And when things are silent, when people aren't talking, in a way, that's when the action starts. That's when you can start to really, work out what is happening, and you can get yourself together. especially with the moon making a sextile aspect of a Sun and Mercury. That sextile between the Sun and Mercury is very useful, provided you handle that sextile in the right way. Now, you might think moon sextile Mercury, that moon sextile Mercury represents someone who is able to communicate very well, but not in this case. I think that the communication we're talking about is communication perhaps with yourself or with people who you just know really, really well. And if there is any form of communication today, it probably should be done in a quite private, secretive way. It doesn't need to be exposed to sort of public scrutiny, and if something needs to be said, it can very often be said behind closed doors. So a bit of discretion is also required today. I think that really does matter. Now, while all this is going on, I don't think deep down you are confused. No, you're not confused. You actually have a very clear sense of what you're supposed to be doing and where you fit in the world, and your role is actually very important to you. And that's just a feeling you have, and it's a feeling that you don't necessarily have to advertise. And so in fact, when you are away from all the chaos, when you're away from the madding crowd, you do actually start to feel confident, and a confidence that you know what needs to be done. And what needs to be done doesn't have to be done today. It can be done at a later stage, maybe over the weekend, maybe into next week. So Virgo, my apologies for not being very exciting or not having a very exciting forecast, but it's not a very exciting day for anyone. Astrologically, there aren't many aspects happening. The moon is sextile Mercury. I do think that is a bonus. I think that's good for your mind. I think it allows you to have a good understanding of what you're supposed to be doing, of your purpose, and being articulating to yourself what your next steps are. But I don't think you have to spend much time or any time talking to other people. It may actually just be a waste of time. Libra, it's a day when I think that things should run pretty smoothly. We have a sextile between the moon and the sun. The moon in Leo is sextile the sun in Libra, and that means you're just going to feel comfortable. You're going to feel that in terms of that balance, balance is very important to the average Libra, that everything will be in balance, and that you don't have to try to put things in balance. It's just there. And so under those circumstances, it might be best if you just accept things as they are. If you're feeling good, then just enjoy it. And in terms of your social life and your friends, if that's important to you, then I think that you'll get on very well with people. Not in a dramatic way. It's just you'll know what to say, and what you hear back will be fine, and there's unlikely to be much in the way of conflict, provided you keep it simple. Always keep it simple. Don't get involved in anything deep or heavy or controversial. Of course, some Librans might not be able to help themselves. Things would be different if things strayed into the area, for example, of money. And that is because the moon is square Venus. Venus is in Scorpio, Venus is your ruler. If money gets involved in the conversation, or if there are financial issues to deal with, then it is different. Then you might find that the harmony is threatened. Things might get difficult, they might get messy. So perhaps you should start the day thinking about whether money is an issue. And if money is not an issue, then I think things are going to be fine. But maybe money has to be discussed. Sometimes it does, and it can't be avoided. And if money comes up, it may not actually be very comfortable. Also, Libra, we may have to consider what your obligations are. Now, if you want to have an easy day, you can have an easy day. It will be an easy day. You just have to ignore money and just allow things to run their course. But again, is it the right thing to do? Because the Sun is moving to a conjunction of a South Node. And I'm just thinking that if you make things too easy for yourself, you may feel that a little bit of discomfort. So in a way, there's a sort of a yin and yang regarding comfort. If you get too comfortable, you're going to start to feel a little uncomfortable. And that discomfort may come from a certain sense of guilt, a certain sense that maybe someone needs your help, or someone needs you to just acknowledge their existence. So who is it that needs acknowledging? So I think someone needs to be acknowledged. And just doing something out of the blue, just sending someone an email or a text message or calling them, someone you feel guilty about. Because Librans do actually feel guilt. They do get a lot of guilt with Librans, particularly in social settings. And perhaps you can do something to assuage your sense of guilt. Something you just don't want to do, but you just do it, and it just makes the day a whole lot better. Scorpio. Venus is continuing through your sign, just a reminder of that. And Venus is slowly starting to move towards a sextile with Mars. Now, in astrology, when I first started learning astrology, I was told that with the major aspects, you should allow an 8-degree orb. In other words, you can regard an aspect, a major aspect, like a conjunction, a square, a trine, as being in orb if they're 8 degrees apart. Well, today, Venus and Mars are 8 degrees apart. And from now on, Venus and Mars are getting closer and closer. So perhaps officially we can say that Venus and Mars are in aspect. And that does matter to you. Now, that Venus-Mars aspect is not exact yet. It will take some time to become exact. We're talking probably in a week or two. I should have looked it up, but it's not there yet. But Venus is you. It's about you. Mars is you, but Venus is in your sign. Venus is in Scorpio, and so with Venus in Scorpio, this is a time where you are quite charismatic, and your charisma is growing. And the reason it's growing is because Venus is moving to a trine with Mars, and Mars is you, because Mars rules Scorpio. And so with that Venus trine Mars, that growing a sense of Venus trine Mars, you just get a real sense of what you can do, and people are just going to like you. And I suppose Scorpio season isn't so far away. The Sun will go into Scorpio at the end of October. But already you can feel it, and you may notice that people are responding to you in a different way. They are perhaps acknowledging you in a way perhaps they hadn't been. And also Mars is starting to make a trine to Saturn. Again, that Mars trine Saturn is not exact. It won't be exact for a few days, but that Mars in Pisces, Mars in Cancer, trine Saturn in Pisces is useful, and it allows you to structure yourself, give yourself discipline, and also when you make discoveries, this is a time of discovery actually for Scorpios. You start to realize things that you hadn't noticed before. When you do notice things, when you start to understand what is really going on out there, the Mars trine Saturn is actually going to enable you to bring everything together. And better still, or as a further improvement, we have got the moon in Leo, and moon in Leo is great from a Scorpio point of view, especially as the moon is sextile the sun and it's sextile the Mercury, and this is great, really, having moon in Leo sextile, particularly sextile the Mercury, because it allows you to be a Scorpio. All that privacy and secrecy that can be important to the average Scorpio. You can do that, but you can still have a high public profile if you want. You can still get noticed, but you don't have to really expose yourself to too much scrutiny. You can give people what they want, but you can hold back the things that are important to you. And so you don't have to worry about giving away secrets or revealing too much about your personality. You can just get the balance right. So Scorpio, to my mind, it looks like being really quite a useful day, and a day where you feel that things are really starting to move. And also, Scorpio, I think that you're going to feel that you actually have a chance to put into practice some of the things you've been working on, and some of the talents and skills that you've been developing. You can put it all into practice, and you can do it with enthusiasm. And yeah, I think that you will be really appreciated. So yeah, Scorpio, it does look like being a good day, and I think that things should be moving, and I think you're just going to get a sense that things really are improving, that from now on things are going to get better and better. Of course, nothing goes up in a straight line. Yeah, things are improving in a very consistent way, but still there will be days when things don't feel quite so good. But overall, I would have said, Scorpio, the trajectory is very much up. Sagittarius, you continue to benefit from the moon being in Leo. I think I mentioned this yesterday. The moon is in Leo, the moon is in a fire sign, and you therefore feel that you are really very connected, and connection is extremely important. You have to be able to sort of understand things instantly. You don't have to think about it. You just know, and that really does matter to the average Sagittarian. And I think that you're going to be very supported by the people around you. The moon in Leo does make a sextile to Mercury and a sextile to Venus, and that indicates to me that your friends are on good form. You want to talk to people. It should be easy. Moon sextile Mercury, and of course moon sextile Sun, and everything can be at the level you want it to be on. So if you want things to be light and easy, it can be light and easy. If you want to go perhaps under the surface and delve into areas that perhaps you haven't gone into much in the past, that is something you can do. And at the same time, you will be appreciated. Your abilities and what you do best, it's all on show. So that does make me very optimistic about what can happen today. Just the only thing, Sagittarius, is just remember that it is about you. There is a little bit of pressure to do things other people's way. It might be to do with expectations. People have expected you to behave in a particular way, and they've expected a set of responses from you. And it's easy to fit in with these expectations. But today you don't have to. In fact, bringing the new into your world is something you can do, because the moon is sextile the North Node, and so with the moon sextile the North Node, you can assert yourself through your vision. Because the moon in Leo is about vision. You're seeing something that is beyond yourself. And it's not just beyond yourself, it's beyond a lot of other people as well. Everyone tries to live in their comfort zone. Everyone tries to make it easy for themselves. Sometimes they forget there is a world out there. And that world out there is something you're very aware of. And that's something you need to also to communicate. And I think you can communicate. And so if you ever think that you're being pulled in a particular direction by anyone, you can sort of change the conversation. You can bring up something new, some new discovery, something new that you're interested in, and that can change everything. And so by keeping people on edge a little, it might be a good idea. That you don't want people to be too comfortable, and you can stir things up, and it's just about presenting new possibilities and new knowledge, and you're presenting it not just to other people, but you are presenting it to yourself. And I suppose that's how you need to judge your social interactions. Are these social interactions elevating you? Are they elevating the person on the other end of the interaction? If they are, then it's fine. If they're not, and if there's a little bit of stagnation, then that suggests that it's time, Sagittarius, for you to stir things up a little and maybe be a little bit controversial. And remember, Sagittarians are very good at being controversial, if of course they want to be controversial. Capricorn, there is a lot of stuff in Libra, as I've already talked about. I've just mentioned that the Mercury went into Libra. We've already got the Sun in Libra, and that's very nice. And from a Capricorn viewpoint, it's about your ambitions, what you want to do, where you are going. And I do think that Capricorn, you do have a good sense of what the roadmap actually is. Sorry, that's a terrible term, roadmap. But you have your roadmap, and you know where you're heading. But consider the possibility that you haven't got everything right. And I say that because the Sun is starting to make a conjunction to the South Node. And Mercury also is moving towards a conjunction of the South Node. Now, that conjunction isn't immediate. It's not about today, but you're starting to feel it. I think the conjunction between the Sun and the South Node is exact tomorrow. And it may be that part of your current sense of direction and where you are, how you are formulating your ambitions, is a little bit formulaic. Formulaic in the sense that you may be doing it because you feel that's expected of you. Or perhaps it has something to do with the past. You were supposed to do something. This is what you're supposed to do. And that was told to you. Maybe it was told to you as a child, perhaps. And you've just done the right thing, and now it all seems to be working, but is it entirely the right direction for you? Now, I'm not suggesting, Capricorn, that you change your direction or you find a completely different direction. I'm just thinking that you need to sort of perhaps reconsider it and perhaps make some alterations. I think this is something actually you can do, because the moon is in Leo, and the moon is making a sextile to the sun, and it's also making a sextile to the south node, and it's making a trine to the north node. And through a process of deep thinking and contemplation and perhaps even brutal honesty, you can maybe come to the conclusion that you haven't got it right. You don't need me in order to come to this conclusion. You just have to think about it, think it through in your own way. And you should not be afraid of revisiting the roots of the matter. And you're asking yourself how it really began. Being prepared to go right back. And memory can be important. Memories do have the potential to give you an idea about why you chose a particular direction, who you were trying to please, what you were trying to get away from. And so Capricorn, that just might be a direction perhaps you need to sort of go in and reconsider. And however far you are on a particular road, it doesn't mean that you're stuck on that path. And you shouldn't see things in an entirely sort of two-dimensional way. There's this sort of myth, isn't there? I mean, I don't know if it's a myth, maybe it's true, all that sort of fork in the road stuff, that if you make a choice and you start going down a particular road, then the other road has been excluded. You can't go down two roads at once. Because I suppose that goes back to the concept of road maps. I suppose if you see a map and you see two roads going in two directions, then you think that those two directions are going in, they're completely different. So you can either choose one or other. They're mutually exclusive. Maybe that's the wrong way of seeing it. If you look at things from a multi-dimensional perspective, you can be going in two different directions at the same time. You can be in several different places at once. So try not to see things in an entirely linear way, and just consider that direction can be something quite multi-dimensional. Sorry if that's a bit pie in the sky, but that's kind of the feeling I got. So Capricorn, do be open-minded. And if you are open-minded, and I talked about asking yourself deep questions, it is a day when you can be very inspired, when you can have ideas. Your capacity for having good ideas that almost come from nowhere is very strong. So put yourself in an environment where these ideas can actually happen. I mean, read, talk, whatever is needed to stimulate your brain. But even if you don't read or talk, still, I think there's a capacity for something to suddenly happen, for you to have a sudden realization, and a sudden realization could change everything. Aquarius, you, I think, are aware that you're not alone. I mean, it's always good not to be alone. I mean, none of us are alone. Aquarians sometimes feel that it is a lonely world, that you have your own furrow. You're ploughing your furrow, and that's your furrow, and it's no one else's. And there is that sense of glorious solitude. We all have our own path, but with the moon in Leo, I don't think you need to be alone. I don't think you should be alone, and I think that you should be considering what else is available. And the moon does make a sextile to Mercury, and it does make a sextile to the sun. And that moon sextile sun it's a very nice aspect, and it's about people. It's about having the right relationship to people and being shown a different view of the world. Perhaps you've just become a little bit stubborn and you need to be shown something else. Perhaps you need to be challenged. And so, Aquarius, I think it would be a good idea if you actually searched for challenges, because a good challenge can make all the difference. If everything is just easy and obvious, well, that would be boring, wouldn't it? Though, when you are dealing with other people, and I think it's good to deal with other people, it's important to be questioning. And not everyone is necessarily good for you, at least in their current form. I think that you might just find that some people are very insistent on revisiting the past. They don't really want to fully engage with the future. They may say they're engaging with the future, but it's not a real future. It's a sort of a view of the future which is rooted in the past. It's a fantasy about the future. I suppose, it's like an old science fiction film. An old science fiction film imagined the future in a particular way, but that's not the real future. And in order to understand the real future, not just in terms of yourself, remember, I'm talking about you and other people, how you are trying to move forward. In order to understand this real future, you have to look at the facts, you have to look at the details. And some people are ignoring the details, and they are thinking they can create a future on the basis of fantasy without actually considering the facts. And when you look at the facts, you get a very different picture. So there is a relationship between you and other people and the future, and it all comes together. And there is a danger here that you get the wrong idea about the future. But that doesn't mean to say it can't be changed. And so I suppose if you're working with other people today, and I think you should be working with other people if possible, I think that would be good, but you do need a great sense of realism. The facts matter, and you have to sort of break things up to begin with in order to put them together. So that's something that I think that you do need to do. And finally, I should point out that Mars is moving towards a trine of Saturn. And this trine of Saturn is not exact right now. It's exact in a couple of days' time. But this Mars trine Saturn is, I think, encouraging this process of breaking things down into small component parts. You can't just look at the whole, because it really won't make any sense, or you might just jump to conclusions. You have to have a rigid sense of detail, and you need to be asking questions all the time and focusing on what is really in front of you. Now, there are other aspects to this Mars trine Saturn which perhaps need to be considered. I think this Mars trine Saturn might have a relationship to health and lifestyle. When I say health, I think there are perhaps things you can do to make yourself feel happier, fitter, and healthier. That's certainly something you can do. But I will be discussing that later when that Mars trine Saturn becomes exact. Pisces. Pisces, with the moon moving through Leo, you may be of the opinion that you want to get things right. You perhaps feel that in the past you haven't been able to get things right and that they need to be revisited. And it may just be a matter of pride as well. I know that Pisces is not really a perfectionist. I mean, Pisceans can be perfectionists, but intrinsically, you're not a real perfectionist. It's not crucial to your whole self-worth. But still, I think there is going to be a perfectionist streak that comes out into the open today. And if you do something, you are going to want to do it right. And I actually think that you can do it right. You can do it right because you know what is required of you. I think it's going to be fairly obvious, and you're just going to feel that you're able to hit the right standard. That can always be difficult, isn't it? When you're doing a task, when you're told to do a task, and you don't know how well you're supposed to do it. If you do it right, you think you've done it right, and then you're told you've done it wrong, and that's kind of annoying. And there's no self-regulator because you don't know. Particularly if it's a task that you're not fully familiar with, that's not fully part of your routine. But Pisces, I think your ability to judge yourself at the moment is actually very good. So if you're involved with something, whatever it is, whether it's at home or at work or somewhere else, you will be able to get it right. And your sense of perfection, but not too much. Okay, perfection is absolute, isn't it? It doesn't have to be perfect, but it does have to be good enough. If you move from good enough through to perfection, the extra work required is just not worth it. But it is going to be good enough, Pisces. Don't worry about that. And I think that in general, Pisces, you are going to be appreciated, and people will like what you're doing. And I think praise will be available. So that's good. I'm not saying, though, that today is going to be especially exciting. I mean, I think part of the reason it's not going to be exciting is because I think that you're going to be very aware of what the obligations are. There are things that need to be done. And once you've done them all and you've given yourself time to relax, I don't think there's going to be much opportunity for having huge amounts of fun. But is that going to be anything you're going to want? I probably not. Now, one aspect that I should mention is the fact that Mars is starting to make a sextile to Saturn, and Saturn is in Pisces, and Mars will be making that aspect over the next few days. And normally when you hear Mars Saturn, you think, oh, that sounds rather grim because it's a pair. Saturn is the greater malefic, Mars is the lesser benefic. But when they're in trine, I think it's easier. And certainly in the Pisces chart, when you've got Saturn in Pisces, you're very familiar with this, with the structure that Saturn is creating. And I think that with Mars trine Saturn, I think that you have a chance to start to apply your energy in a sort of a gradual way towards the achievement of things that are important to you. They're important to you. They may not be important to other people, but that doesn't matter. It's you that matters. You're the one that matters. And I think that you're able to start working solidly towards something of, I would have said, lasting value. But this Mars trine Saturn, you don't have to feel that it's all that it's all about today. It will get stronger, and I think there'll be plenty of scope over the next few days to be able to benefit from what I think is a rather favourable influence. And that's it. Those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now I want to look at today from a perspective of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Friday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 64, which is before completion. So with this hexagram, we get the idea of crossing a river. We're engaged in a big enterprise. We're trying to achieve something. We're trying to move from one bank to the next bank. And it's not an easy task. We could get stuck halfway through. We could fall in the river. Bad things can happen. So we feel that we're in this sort of intermediate stage where we kind of feel somewhat vulnerable. Now, I don't know what this applies to. It just may just apply to one small thing that you happen to be involved in. It could be something much larger you're connected with. And with this hexagram, we have two moving lines, and the second line moves, and we get the idea of getting stuck in the mud. Now that sounds bad to begin with. We don't want to get stuck in the mud. So the idea is, I suppose, you've got this carriage trying to cross a river. It doesn't sound a particularly wise thing to do, to cross a river in a carriage, but the wheels are stuck in the mud, and the idea is that perhaps we have to brake. We have to stop what we're doing. It's not like we're in immediate danger, but we have to pause. Now, one view indicated by Wilhelm in the Wilhelm translation is that we break the movement and we stop what we're doing, and we perhaps pause and or even retreat for the time being. That is another one approach. An alternative approach would be to keep going. We try very hard, and it is hard work, but we are eventually able to make progress. Whether it's continuing to make progress or whether it's a sensible retreat, that's a little bit of a controversy here, I think, in terms of my understanding of the I Ching. But certainly we need to be careful. We certainly need to apply the brakes here. But it just may be that it is a struggle, and we have to accept that struggle. And then the fourth line moves. And the fourth line is talking about some kind of military campaign. Wilhelm talks about disciplining the devil's country, and it's like a military campaign where we're in an area where we perhaps have to use force, but it does say we are going to be successful, and it talks about 3 years of success. So although it is a very dangerous enterprise to cross the Great River, really dangerous, the suggestion is that we're going to be able to manage it. So if you are involved in something and you're concerned about whether it's going to work or not, then the message here is don't panic. It looks as if you are getting there. You are getting to the other side. Yeah, it's going to be a struggle, no doubt about it, but success seems very likely. Now, this does move. This does move because we have two moving lines. It does move to hexagram 23, which is splitting apart. Now, that does sound bad on the surface, but I would see it like this. I would say that if something is splitting apart, it perhaps means that we are splitting apart from something. So if we're able to cross the river, then there is water between ourselves and whatever we're trying to get away from. And it may be that as we make progress, it's difficult progress. As we make progress, we are moving further and further away from something or someone or from a situation that is no longer any use. The whole thing breaks apart because we've left. We don't need to be there anymore. So maybe it's a situation where we decided we needed to cross the river for very good reasons. And having crossed that river, things do fall apart, but we knew this was going to happen anyway. And perhaps it's literally splitting apart. It is literally the parting of the waves. And so I think in this situation, I would probably be quite positive about splitting apart. It's about us getting away from something which is no longer any good for us. Okay, now I want to consider Kamala Harris. My apologies if you're bored of Kamala Harris, but I think she's got such an interesting chart. Born exactly on a full moon. Now, I want to start off by kind of looking at some of the reasons why she might get elected president. Now, I must make it clear, I do not believe she's going to make it. I think that Trump is going to win. But still, there are some things that bother me. I mean, one can't say that there's nothing positive going on. There are some positive things going on, and so let's just look at her chart. And here's her chart. And what is positive about her chart? Now, one thing that Kamala Harris does have in her chart is she's got North Node rising. We sometimes forget the North Node, but the North Node is important. I think you can regard the North Node, certainly from a Western perspective, as being rather like Jupiter. It's not exactly like Jupiter. And so the South Node is a bit like Saturn. And the North Node works very well in Gemini. Both East and West. In Vedic astrology, it works well in Gemini, also in Western astrology. I suppose that's probably more important in Vedic astrology. But with her ascendant at 24 Gemini and her North Node at well, in fact, they're both at 24 Gemini, really exact. And she's got her North Node in Gemini, in both East and West. And maybe this explains why she's so successful. Whatever happens in the presidential election, she is a very successful woman. It doesn't matter why she's successful. It doesn't matter if you think she's hopeless. It doesn't matter. She is successful. She's almost reached the pinnacle, and she's so close to being president. I mean, she could be president later today if something happens to Biden. So she's really close, and she's done really well. So that might be reflected by the fact that she's got the North Node in Gemini, and of course her Saturn, you could say, is pretty good. It's Saturn is in its own sign in Aquarius, so it's a good Saturn. But as far as that North Node is concerned, I saw a YouTube video where someone was, I think, predicting that she was going to win, and I think they were sort of using Hellenistic astrology, and it's very simple, the argument about why she's going to win. I don't think she is going to win, I must make that clear, but here's the argument about why she's winning. And it's not an argument I discount. It's kind of an argument I find a little bit disturbing, but let me just explain what the argument is. It's saying that in Hellenistic astrology, and it's become a technique that has become very popular. It wasn't popular when I was studying astrology, but certainly in the last 10, 20 years it's become popular. And that is using profections and using sort of annual profections. The idea is the ascendant shifts every year. So she was born with Gemini rising, so Gemini covers the first year of life. The second year is covered by Cancer. The third year is covered by Leo, and then you go round. And then when she's 12 years old, she gets to Gemini all over again. And so she's about to have her 60th birthday. So her 60th birthday is in 3 weeks. And so 5 times 12 is 60. So in 60 years, after 60 years, she comes back to her ascendant. So that Gemini North Node is strong, and it's I think that she can perhaps benefit from that. And better still is that Jupiter is in Gemini. So she's got Jupiter moving towards her ascendant, and at a time when her ascendant is prominent because she's just turned 60. And so this could be, in itself, all the evidence you need that she's going to win. So I do think that that is a really quite a compelling argument to say that she's going to win. And you could then counter-argue and say, well, yeah, it's Jupiter in Gemini. Jupiter is in its detriment. So is Jupiter going to be able to yield so much when Jupiter is in its detriment? I would argue probably not. On the other hand, at the time of a presidential election, Mercury is in Sagittarius, so Jupiter will actually be in mutual reception with Mercury at the time of a presidential election. So that is an argument for suggesting why she might win on November the 5th. And we can look at this also from a Vedic perspective. So here's her Vedic chart. And so if you look at her Vedic chart, there is her Vedic chart, and this is her ascendant. So her ascendant and her North Node are in Gemini. There's three, the third sign. It's not quite so easy to read this chart, but so Jupiter, from a Vedic perspective, though, is going to be in Taurus at the time of the election. So she doesn't benefit from Jupiter going into her first house from a Vedic perspective. But in terms of the dashas in her sign, in terms of her dashas, the period she is in. So she is in her Rahu dasha, and she's been in her Rahu dasha since 2012, and that was very much at the beginning of her rapid climb politically. Started with around the time when she became, I forget the date she became district attorney of, she went district attorney of, not district attorney, Attorney General of California. I don't know quite when that was off the top of my head, but then she became a senator, and then she became vice president. And certainly since 2012, things have been moving very well for her. And that's not surprising, because this whole period is ruled by Rahu, the North Node. And she's got North Node in Gemini. Margaret Thatcher's ascent from cabinet minister to prime minister took place during her Rahu Dasha. In fact, the moment her Rahu Dasha ended in 1990, within months she was no longer prime minister. So that kind of fits, with what we know about Margaret Thatcher. So this Rahu Dasha, I would have said, is pretty fortunate overall for Kamala. And then Venus, she's in her Rahu major period, but Venus sub-period. And this Venus sub-period lasts from from February 2024 to February 2027. And so Venus, Rahu Venus is not necessarily too bad. And I think that since early 2024, things have certainly got better for Kamala. I think she sort of hit bottom probably just about a year ago, and I think there has been some improvement. And of course now things have gone very well for her, because she's now not just vice president, but she is the candidate to be president. So things are really working for her. And so there is her Venus, and from a Vedic perspective, Venus is in mutual reception to the Sun, because Venus is in Leo. I know she's got Venus in Virgo, Western, but she's got Venus in Leo, Eastern. And it's in Venus is in Leo, and the Sun is in Libra, so very mutual reception. And so being in the the Rahu Mahadasha, very strong Rahu in Gemini, and in the Venus sub-period, that is pretty good. And the only problem is, and the only sort of fly in the ointment is the fact that she's got Saturn opposition Venus in her Vedic chart. And where is Saturn transiting Saturn right now? Well, transiting Saturn is in Pisces, Western, but it's in Aquarius, Eastern. So she has got Saturn opposition her Venus, transiting Saturn. And of course, in Vedic astrology, transits happen sort of house to house, sign to sign. So it may be that the good luck of her Venus, and Venus is also ruler of her fifth house. It's the fifth house is a Purva Punya house. It's about past life credit. She's getting all that credit from her past life. It's all coming in, and the fifth house is a fortunate house. So it is a very good Venus, I think. But maybe Saturn opposition Venus in her natal chart, and therefore also transiting Saturn is perhaps undermining it. So that is a possibility. But still, if we look at her annual profection and her Vedic chart, and you're trying to predict whether or not she's going to win in November, you've got grounds for saying that she is going to win, certainly. And then we might want to consider her. Let's go back and consider her. Go back to her chart and look at her progressions, or in particular her solar arc directions. So the solar arc directions are kind of interesting. So solar arc directions is when you move everything in her. You move everything in her chart by 1 degree, and so 1 degree for 1 year. Now progressions, you just look at the planets as they move naturally in the days after someone was born. Solar arc directions is you just move everything at the same rate. Everything, for example, would move around 60 degrees after birth. So that's what you would do. So if you look at Kamala's chart, she's got in her natal chart, she's got Moon at 27 Aries and the Sun at 27 Libra. And if you do a solar arc direction for her for the time of the election, you see everything has moved. The Moon has moved from 28 Aries to around 27 Aries to 28 Gemini. So everything has moved 60 degrees. So these solar arc directions do indicate something really interesting, which I think some people might regard as being a positive. I'm sure astrologers have picked up on this. Probably lots of astrologers have picked up on this. But if you look at her solar arc directed sun, which is the same as her secondary progressed sun, it's at 28. It's at 28 Sagittarius. So it crossed her descendant 4 degrees earlier. So as she became vice president, the sun was crossing her descendant. And now the sun is exactly sextile her Saturn. And so likewise, the progressed sun is sextile her Saturn. The progressed moon is trine her Saturn. And you could argue that is a powerful signature of success, because she's got a good Saturn. Saturn is close to the midheaven. Saturn is about leadership, and with Saturn in Aquarius on the midheaven, surely that is a sign that she's going to win the election. Surely, but how do we see that sextile? Is that, we are assuming, of course, that a sextile is a fortunate aspect. I think a sextile perhaps is a fortunate aspect, but maybe we should just see it as an aspect. But I don't know. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how this election works out, because you could say her full moon is progressing. Particularly if you take a German approach, if you use a 15-degree dial, I don't want to go into the details of a 15-degree dial, where you basically make conjunctions, trines, squares, oppositions, even the semi-squares, sorry, not semi-squares, the semi-sextiles, quincunxes, make it all the same, then you could say, well, it's just the Sun is just making an aspect to Saturn, and that's not so good. But still, I think we have to say she's got progressed Sun aspecting her Saturn, making a sextile to Saturn, making an exact aspect to Saturn. So as you can see, these are the things that make me worried. If I'm trying to predict that she's going to lose, it's why I'm not saying she's definitely going to lose. 100%, she will lose. When Trump becomes president next year, I'm not going to use that language. I believe she's going to lose, but there is evidence that is disturbing, at least disturbing to my... It's not because I'm a Trump supporter. It's disturbing in terms of, I like to make a prediction. I have made a prediction, but of course I'm aware that there is counter evidence to my prediction. Now, there's also the question of her solar return. She hasn't had her solar return yet, but October the 20th is her birthday. And if you take the annual profection view, when she hits her 60th year, that's when her luck should perhaps start to improve. And if you look at her solar return, this is her solar return chart for 2024. Venus is rising. Very nice. Venus is a benefic. It's on the ascendant. It's nice. I think Venus is peregrine, though. That's not so good. It doesn't have any dignity in Sagittarius. So I'm unconvinced that Venus rising in itself is a particularly good signature. And you could say, oh, well, Moon is conjunct Jupiter. That's nice. If you've got Moon conjunct Jupiter, that sort of is an indication of success. And you could say, well, Jupiter is ruler of her ascendant. But at the time of the solar return, Jupiter is peregrine, and Jupiter is in her 7th house. So you could say, well, that may represent the Moon conjunct Jupiter would be... You could say it's her rival winning, but I don't know. I think that's kind of reading too much into it. I think that there is some good stuff in that solar return. I think it is actually nice that Venus is rising. I think it is nice that the Moon is moving towards the conjunction of Jupiter, and Jupiter is ruler. So I think that's good. But then look at Saturn. Saturn is on the IC. So Saturn on the IC is right there at the bottom of the chart. Now that's not quite so fortunate, is it? Saturn could, to an extent, on the IC, that could represent failure, her not succeeding. And when we do the converse solar return, and very often the converse solar return works better than the direct solar return. In other words, this solar return is set for 60 years after she was born. Let's set up a solar return chart for 60 years before she was born. So this is the chart for 1904, October the 20th, 1904. We also get Saturn on the IC. So we get a double signature of Saturn on the IC. So okay, it's Saturn in Aquarius on the IC, that's true. But we see that the moon is exactly square Uranus in that chart. And I would have said that Moon square Uranus is not great. I think that suggests some news, maybe not good news, something happening unexpectedly, which could spoil things. So I think that the converse solar return is perhaps not as fortunate as a direct solar return. But I just wanted to look at a few charts and Vedic and her solar return, and her direct solar return, and perhaps her profections and the fact that she's got progressed sun making a fortunate aspect to her Saturn. These are strong signatures of success. But then I wanted to think about Kamala from a more negative perspective. And I was just really interested by her inability to deal with social situations, particularly when she's in public. Her not turning up to this Al Smith dinner was something really that we need to consider. So the Al Smith dinner is this dinner in New York, and it raises money for charities, Catholic charities in New York, and it's traditional for presidents and the rival candidates to turn up to this dinner. And the idea is that they make light-hearted speeches, and they don't take themselves too seriously. But it's not completely serious. It's obviously not compulsory for her to turn up, and she needs a little bit of levity, and it helps if she can speak off the cuff. So she decides not to turn up, and she claims she can't turn up because she's campaigning. I mean, Trump's going to turn up, and apparently the last candidate who didn't turn up was, I think, Mondale in 1984, and he lost. So she is actually breaking a tradition, and I think it perhaps indicates her social ineptitude. I think that's how we have to see it. I mean, it's a nice excuse to say that she's got an alternative engagement, that she's got to campaign, but I think her not showing up does tell us something about her and her inability to communicate off the cuff. And why is she being kept away from the public? Okay, that's a question that the right is asking. Why isn't she being interviewed? What is her problem? When she does get interviewed, even when she was on Opera, it was a disaster. She just seemed to be talking nonsense. At least that was my perspective. And there's no real sense of being able to talk with conviction about policy. Again, I'm not expressing my viewpoint. I'm just saying what I can see. I mean, I can see it. She did okay in a debate, but of course that was because it was really rehearsed. So what is it? What is her problem? And so that is the question I wanted to ask. What is her problem? And so let's go back to her chart and ask this question. What is the issue? And if you're talking about the way someone communicates, you can look at the moon and you can look at Mercury. Mercury is about more mental communication, how you communicate, with your mind, with your your cognition, and the moon is more emotional communication. Now, her moon is full. So this is her moon. That's one way she could communicate. You'd think moon in Aries, she's a woman. Moon in Aries is who she is. Her expressing herself freely. Clearly, she can express herself freely when she's in the right setting, but as she goes up, as she has to deal with complex situations, when she's in the public eye, the pressure starts to mount, and the moon is the public. And I think the fact that the moon is opposition the sun, exactly opposition the sun, when we say exactly opposition the sun, we are talking about 9 minutes orb. I mean, she was born just before a full moon. I mean, really, just before a full moon. So it was really close. And I'm thinking that proximity of the sun to the moon is meaning that the sun in Libra, it's fallen in Libra, is somehow damaging the moon and is preventing her from being spontaneous. And there is another issue here, and that is Uranus. Uranus is at 13-15 Virgo. Now that means that Uranus is sesquiquadrate the moon, and it is semi-square the sun. So the moon is not just getting hit by the sun, it's getting hit by Uranus. So she's got Uranus on the sun-moon midpoint. It's about, I think, 32 minutes off. So she's got Uranus quite closely on the sun-moon midpoint. Now you'd think if Uranus is on the sun-moon midpoint, that would be very much who she is. You'd think about someone who was original, who was a reformer. Maybe she is in her own way. But in terms of how she's dealing with the world out there, with the world in general, that Uranus might be a little bit freaked out. There's something bothering her, that she is almost traumatized by dealing with the public, particularly in that setting when she's now finally trying to be president. And Uranus is traumatizing her. I think that is possible, and is just making it difficult for her to express herself in a free way. Now, in terms of what it means for Uranus to be on the sun-moon midpoint, I think that this is something to consider. So Reinhold Ebertin says about Uranus on the sun-moon midpoint. Remember, Uranus is the sun-moon midpoint is sort of about here. So Uranus is semi-square the sun-moon midpoint, or is it? Not sure whether the sun-moon midpoint exactly is over this way or that way, but it's either semi-square or sesquiquadrate the sun-moon midpoint. So Reinhold Ebertin says about Uranus on the sun-moon midpoint, the urge for freedom, the urge to act independently. So that's good. That's what we would expect. Then he says, lack of adaptability, inner rebellion, sudden events in friendship, marriage, parental home, shared upsets, sudden conflicts, separation of partners. Now, the words that I would take from that would be lack of adaptability. Uranus might be in Virgo, but Uranus is very much got a way it wants to be, and there is a lack of adaptability, I think, to that Uranus on the sun-moon midpoint. Now, turning to what Alfred Witter says about Uranus on the sun-moon midpoint. So he says about Uranus on the sun-moon midpoint something fairly similar. He says, exciting and trying days, daily tension in partnership and marriage, sudden events in a partnership, a clash with a friend or mate, sudden hostility or separation. And I believe it's the case that people find it very difficult to work with her. She has a high turnover of staff, and that might be how this Uranus on the sun-moon midpoint works out. So, looking at the moon, we may have some explanation of what's happening. But what about her Mercury? Now, her Mercury is in Scorpio, and Mercury, I won't say it's badly placed in Scorpio, it just happens to be in early Scorpio. But if we look at Scorpio, if we look at Mercury closely, the first thing we notice is that Mercury is trine Saturn. So you might say, well, Mercury trine Saturn, that's nice. It's a very disciplined woman. I'm sure she was a good student. Didn't she fail her bar exam the first time? I'm not sure. I think she might have done. But still, Mercury trine Saturn, she studies, she does what she has to do. You can imagine her preparing for the debate with Donald, Mercury trine Saturn. She studied hard. That's Mercury trine Saturn. So that's good. But then there's something else about that Mercury-Saturn relationship, which I think may help explain her problem with, for example, going to this Al Smith dinner. And it is the fact that Mercury is on the antisia of Saturn. So what do I mean by that? The antisia relates to the solstice points. So there is 0 degrees Cancer in her chart, and there is 0 degrees Capricorn. So if we reflect Saturn, if we reflect Saturn in the Cancer Capricorn axis, Saturn exactly reflects onto Mercury, and vice versa. Mercury reflects onto Saturn. So what we have is Aries, the Aries point, which is here, is square her Mercury-Saturn midpoint, very, very exactly. I think it's, I think off the top of my head, it's 2 minutes. The orb of that is, with 2 arc-minute orb, that is really, really close. And so, so Aries represents the wider world. You could say it represents the political world. It's this world that she's thrust herself into, the world of millions and millions of people watching, the world of having to speak at the Al Smith dinner, you know, other people in the past, Donald Trump, Hillary, presidents, Reagan, you know, all these people who spoke at this Al Smith dinner. It's a kind of event with Aries, you know, with Aries on the Mercury-Saturn midpoint, with Mercury and Saturn on each other's anticia, is something that she completely freaks her out. And I think that that is absolutely a critical thing, Aries on the Mercury-Saturn midpoint. Let me just see what Alfred Witter says about Aries on the Mercury-Saturn midpoint. I haven't looked it up, so I'm not sure, but he says the Aries point. Well, he says to wander about, excursions, journeys around the world, voyages, location changes. I don't think Alfred Witter very summed that up very well. I suppose she would argue that, she's out campaigning, she's out travelling, but in terms of the Al Smith dinner. But I think that relationship between Mercury and Saturn is really absolutely critical. Now we have to consider how this all works out in terms of election day. So let's look at Kamala Harris's chart, and we will put Kamala Harris's chart in the middle, and we will put the election on the outer wheel. So one thing that is kind of very important about the election is that Mars moves into Leo. Mars moves into Leo just before the election. So this chart, so the outer wheel, I've gone for 11 p.m. Eastern time. You know, that will presumably be when the results start to come in. So Mars is in Leo. And now one thing about Mars going into Leo is that the moment Mars goes into Leo, it's in mutual reception with the Sun. So Mars will be in Leo, which is a sign of the Sun. The Sun will be in Scorpio, which is a sign of Mars. So strong. We've got 2 male planets in mutual reception. And I think that might be a sign of a man winning the election. So I think that Sun-Mars mutual reception does work in Trump's favour. That's the first point. Secondly, Mars is making a square to Kamala's Mercury. There's her Mercury at 1 degree 28 Scorpio. There's transiting Mars moving to the square of that Mercury. So what does that mean? That doesn't just mean that Mars is square her Mercury. It means that Mars is squaring a Mercury which is on the anticia of Saturn. And so that's that point. It's actually hitting Saturn via the anticia. So it's not just squaring Mercury. It's hitting the anticia of Saturn. So I would have said that square to Mercury is critical, and this is a very difficult time. Over the next day, maybe who knows? Maybe the full results won't be out. We won't on the evening of the 5th. Maybe it'll feed into the next day or maybe the day after. But this is what's happening as Mars is hitting Mercury. You can feel that sense of depression here and the full impact. You can imagine how bad it is. I mean, she finds it difficult to just communicate off the cuff, in general, but to have to communicate off the cuff after she's lost an election, that could be absolutely crushing for her. Now, there is another aspect that we need to consider, and that is Saturn. So Saturn, at the time of the election, okay, it's conjunct her Chiron, that's true, but Saturn is at 12 degrees 46 Pisces. So Kamala's moon is at 2739 Aries. In other words, Saturn is exactly semi-square her moon. And Saturn is, there's her sun. Saturn is exactly semi-square her sun. So, sorry, exactly sesquiquadrate her sun. So the fact that Saturn is by semi-square sesquiquadrate is exactly hitting her full moon. So it's in fact hitting her whole Uranus on the sun-moon midpoint configuration. And I think that is deadly. I mean, that is really awful. And so I think that that suggests that all the excitement, Uranus on the sun-moon midpoint, is smashed by Saturn. And Saturn brings her down to earth in a really dramatic way. So that, to my mind, suggests a defeat. I mean, there are other things to look at. See, I can't just look at one thing and say that indicates a defeat, because then you can show something else. You could say, look, transiting Jupiter is close to her ascendant. That might indicate success. Progressed Sun is exactly sextile trine her Saturn. That might indicate her success. She's got Moon conjunct Jupiter in her solar return. It's all about balance. And I think this is the problem about predicting the result of this election. It's just not like it was in 2020 when it was absolutely clear that Biden was going to win. This time it's different. And one just has to balance everything out. And overall, that's why I've come to the conclusion that Kamala is going to lose. And if nothing bad happens, Trump will become president in January. But it's what I believe. I don't feel I can be so certain that I can say Trump will become president in January. It's not quite like that, but I do believe that Kamala is going to lose. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say for today. I hope you found that of some interest. I hope you are not offended by what I said. I'm not being partisan here. I'm not supporting one side or the other. I mean, I suppose in a sense I predicted Trump's going to win, so obviously I want Trump to win in one sense. Would I vote for Trump? I can't vote in America, not necessarily. I think that Trump's and the environment is a complete disaster. I know the Democrats aren't great, but to my mind, the environment is the number one issue. So how can you vote for Trump when he couldn't care less about the environment? But so it's a difficult thing. But anyway, thank you very much for watching. The kettle's going, and if you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. And if you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thanks again for watching, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.